Okay, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host. And today my guest is a guy who has been in a lot of bands over the years. The majority of them are bands that played original music. He's a guy that's often playing in multiple bands at once, like he still does today, right?
Yes.
And, so with that intro, welcome Jimmy Cuneo to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Grab that mic, jump right on it.
There, thanks.
You've used a mic before.
Well, I don't know if you're supposed to be way up or way back.
That's all right.
It depends on the mic, I guess.
So, everybody from Erie knows the Cuneo name because of the sports writers, your dad, your two brothers. You wrote for a while for the Showcase.
Yes, I reviewed bars and grills. I used to make the quizzes.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Early 80s, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. You are the youngest of four, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And anybody else musicians?
My older sister played piano. My grandmother was a great piano player, ragtime. She was born in 1898.
Wow.
And she would play these things like The Man Who Jumped Over the Piano, these great rags.
Okay.
She was badass.
Did you get influenced by her?
I did. I wish I could have gotten more influence from her, but she was very good. My mom was pretty good, but my grandmother was really good.
So there was a piano in the house?
Always.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any of your brothers were not into music? So
well, actually,
just you and your sister?
when I was really little, we were like the Von Trapp family singers.
Oh,
we
no.
would actually, after dinner, sing these corny old folk songs that my mother had learned growing up in Wisconsin.
Really?
Like the cow that gets stuck on the railroad track and gets run over by the train, and it's all a big pun on her tail was on her lonesome spine. It's a joke on the trail of the lonesome pine. I found that out years later. But we would actually perform at the local old age homes.
No way.
As like the Cuneo family singers, and I loved it, but I was the only one.
Okay.
My brothers and sisters don't talk about this as
Sure, right.
Yeah.
And your dad at the time was the sports editor for the Times.
He was.
Was
Yes.
he singing too, or?
Yes, he was. He was pretty good.
Yeah.
He,
That's interesting.
yeah. He had a radio show on WLEU, a sports show.
Yeah.
And he made friends with the program director, and he would take home all the records that they weren't using anymore. And we amassed, thousands of these 45s. And that was kind of like my job as a kid to classify them. And that's how my taste got so warped. I didn't know the difference between a hit and a dud.
Yeah,
So
right,
they were all
right.
lumped together, all the same to me.
Some people would say that's warped. Some people would say that's broad.
Yes.
I mean, you and I were just having a conversation beforehand about the Erie County Fieldhouse and my book and everything, and you named a bunch of
terrific
bands.
book, yes.
Thank you. You named a bunch of bands that you went to see there, and they ranged from Seals and Croft to Uriah Heep.
Right, Nazareth.
Yeah.
I remember Nazareth, the singer had a bagpipe, and he had the talk box hooked into the bagpipe. So he was the one going, like that.
He was doing his Frampton imitation
Yes.
there. So you and the family, you got a piano going on, and
Yes.
I think of you as a piano keyboard player. I know you
Yes.
play guitar too. Was piano your first?
First instrument, yep.
All right.
Yeah.
What age?
Oh, probably 3 or 4. I got the bug really young. My brother taught me how to play Strangers in the Night. And I remember my folks got me to play for their friends, and that was it. I had the bug after that. I
When
was
you were real little?
complete ham after that.
Really?
Yes.
And just piano at this point?
Yes.
Lessons?
Yes, I took lessons from Father Cray, who was a really good teacher. He had about 50 students, and I was the worst one. I was like General George Custer at West Point, dead last. Because I played sports. That's I played 3 sports.
Okay.
But some of his students were just fantastic.
Well, wait, where is Father Cray? He's obviously a priest?
Yes, he's passed away. He passed away in 1999.
Okay.
But he was, Erie back then had some big-time music teachers. There was him, and then later on I took from Basil Ronzitti.
Sure, right.
And
where was he at? Like private? Or
yes, Father Cray taught out of his house on Stafford Avenue. He lived with his aunt.
Oh, and where was he a priest?
Catholic priest.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was kind of an independent, and then he became the chaplain at the Vets Hospital.
That's very interesting. I always hear about the Basils or
Yes.
the different common names that you hear, but Father Cray, all right.
Yeah, he was a great player too.
How long did you take lessons?
He finally had enough of me and got rid of me after 4 years. I actually endured for 4 years, But ironically, it was after I quit. I was about 15. That's when I really started playing seriously, like rock and roll with my friends. I met some people who could. I was amazed that they could play without reading music.
Who were these guys?
Like Tony Krasinski,
and
David's brother David, and their older brother Billy, and their dad was Norb from Norbs.
Yeah. So you start. Is that the first time you are playing with anyone?
Yes,
together.
Yes, and then we actually got a band together, 1982, called the KG Beats.
That's right. Tony talked about that on his
on
his episode. I forgot about.
We were all
that.
St. John's boys. It was Tony and David and Joe Washik played drums.
All right. So that's what'd you say? 82.
82.
So you're 16.
No, I'm actually 20.
At that point.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And
but still not old enough to drink. And Norb knew how old we were. So
right. Yep. But Norb's was the place, and the KG Beats were playing a combination of covers and originals.
Yes, we got this harebrained idea to play songs way too fast.
Okay.
So we would play every song we learned 10,000 miles an hour.
All right. And I always think of you as someone who is a composer. You write songs. Were you writing back then too?
Yes, we started writing. I don't think I can even mention what the subjects were.
Sure you can. Yeah.
Well, I was really like teed off about all the feminine products that were being shoved down your throat on TV. So we wrote a little song to that.
Is that song recorded somewhere? Like Tony has a lot of that stuff.
Yes. And then I think Buddah for some reason recorded it too later on.
What was the name of it?
Temporary Water Weight Gain.
Okay. All right. Well, so first band. That's it.
Yes.
All right. So you didn't start super early, but you're 15, 16, or 17, what'd you say?
No, I'm about 20 this time. But I was actually roadieing for bands at 17, 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who?
Oh, Griffin. Tony was playing. He was 16. Tony was playing.
So while he's in that with John Rainey and
actually, this was after John.
Mark Nelson still.
With Mark. Yeah, it was Mark and Billy, Tony's older brother, and they were a power trio.
Oh, okay.
Griffin.
Yeah. Am I right in saying Rainey was in that
actually,
band? Actually,
he was in the band before. They were called Livewire.
Livewire. Yep. I'm sorry. Yeah.
With John Ploskevich was the singer.
Yes, right. Looks very Bon Scottish.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, he's a nice guy.
And so you're roadieing for them.
Yeah. Oh, well, you get drafted into roadieing for them.
Yeah. I mean, all those teen years, you're playing. You know how to play. Are you hanging around musicians like the Krasinskis and that? And are you getting the bug more?
Oh, yeah. Just like whoever will have us. I remember seeing Rhyme and Reason was a great band with Robin Burek back then.
Right.
It was just terrific. So many good bands.
Yeah. I love asking musicians like yourself back then, like, where did you like to go see bands? And especially when you were underage, where could you sneak in to
Well, you could kind of get into Lose In Westfield.
Okay.
I remember seeing Love Affair was a great cover band from Youngstown.
All right.
And Alexander, and they had Northeast Roots. A couple of the guys were from Northeast. Jeff Hare, who became like a famous light man.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. So you're checking out whoever you can at the time. Yeah,
a total junkie.
But you said you were an athlete too. So you played what?
I played baseball, basketball, and football.
Oh, geez.
But stopped growing like freshman. I was a freshman at prep, and I knew I would get killed by my friends.
Right.
They recommended that I didn't go out and get killed.
Right.
And that's I guess when I started pouring all my energy into playing.
That's what I wondered.
It became my refuge.
Yeah. And at the time, so when is this? This is late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah.
What are you listening to?
We were really listening to progressive rock a lot then. We loved Rush.
Okay.
And we loved King Crimson and Gentle Giant and Jethro Tull.
You're hitting them all.
But then, we all kind of got not really the punk rock bug, but the new wave.
Yeah.
Like it was a little less cerebral.
Right.
And then we started listening to Joe Jackson a lot. His records were great till we found out what a jerk he was.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
He was a big influence. Public Image Limited. We started listening to Gang of Four. Was a band that we liked a lot. XTC.
So as a keyboard player, I mean, Joe Jackson, I get.
It's funny. Back then, I started playing more guitar because keyboards were so expensive.
Oh.
that the only keyboards I had were really junky.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until like the late 80s with the development of, I guess, the microchip.
Right. The synthesizer.
And that keyboards started becoming, you could lift them for one thing.
Right.
And I bought a Yamaha PF85.
Okay.
That was just the best. And then that's when I really started getting into keyboard.
So never dragging around any Leslies or B3s
No,
or anything
although I've
like
been
that.
caught with being too near Ron Yaros when he's been loading out, and I've been part of that.
Yeah.
But he's got it down. He's got a really good system.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the 80s, like you said. I mean, those were almost very 70s-ish types of keyboards
Yes.
and organ sounds, and now everything is way more condensed, lighter weight.
Although drum machines were really big in the late 80s. It's
How about the early 80s? So you start out. Are you in the Wiggling Judies right away, like in 80?
Yeah, that band was just only together a very short time.
Yeah.
That was actually right after we started the KG Beats. We started the Wiggling Judies.
And when you say we, you and Mark?
It was Jimmy Rosenthal and Mark and Danny Smith.
Right.
The ex-Whites had just broken up.
Okay.
And we kind of we were lucky. We lucked into their whole fan base. So we were just, even though only together a short time, it was popular. It was
right.
We were packing them in at Sherlock's and at MJ's.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I've had Christine on the podcast.
Yes.
I've had Mark, like you said, Mark Nelson on the podcast. They talk about those seminal places back in the day that catered to original bands.
Mm-hmm.
So MJ's I always think of.
Yes.
Sherlock's obviously had, was it Monday?
Modern Music Monday.
But
they were, there were so many good original bands back then.
Yeah.
I mean, really good band. At least half a dozen good original bands.
Tell me some of them. Who were some of your favorites back then?
Tripod Jimmy was a great band.
Right.
With Tom Herman, who had played with Per Ubu.
Yeah.
From Cleveland. And Lenny Bovee.
Okay.
Who had been in the Peens.
Yep. I know those names. Yeah.
And he was terrific. And he was a cousin of Angie DiTullio from Hector's.
Oh, really?
So we had that connection there, too.
All right. I always ask people, like, let's say you're in the Wiggling Judies. I mean, who did you like to go out to see on your off nights? Or had you seen Pistol Whip and those guys?
I did. I actually got to see Pistol Whip one time at the Factory. That was when the Uthman Corps, for a short time, was a teenage disco.
Oh.
And they got a great idea to get Pistol Whip one night. And,
how'd that go over?
And actually went over very well.
It did?
Yeah.
And so describe Pistol Whip as Danny Smith.
Or no, Pistol Whip was actually John Drum, Willie Cotter. The classic lineup was John Drum, Willie Cotter, Rick DeBello, Jim DeMonte, and Rick DeMadura was the drummer. But they had been around. Bob Rychick had been the singer for a while.
Okay.
Doc Rosequist, who later became the chief of police in Northeast.
Oh, really?
Was the drummer.
All right.
And I played with Doc in a couple of bands.
Huh.
Great guy, Chuck.
And you obviously were leaning towards that type of, like you said, new wave, even punk in some respects.
Yeah, we just, I found that it was novel to write the short 2-minute songs.
Yeah.
It was a lot easier than learning the long. Actually, it was too hard to play the progressive rock back then.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah. I guess what I was thinking of when you said Dan Smith, I was thinking of the Generic Beat. So were they
actually Generic Beat is
after?
A couple years after
Wiggling
Judies.
All right.
And then a couple years after that is Rub the Buddah.
Okay.
Which is almost was pretty much Wiggling Judies without Mark and Jimmy, but Blammo was the drummer.
Blammo was the drummer. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's stay on the Judies for a minute, because a lot of people remember you, and you did have one album.
Or one single.
But folks loved it.
We did have a lot of original tunes.
Yeah. I mean, it was a combination, right, of covers and originals?
Yes. We like to call it bubble punk.
Okay.
We were doing a lot of the bubblegum tunes from our childhood, like Yummy, Yummy, Yummy by the Ohio Express.
Yeah.
And Gimme, Gimme Good Lovin' by Crazy Elephant.
Yeah.
And and that kind of thing.
But speeding them up, making them
No,
your
actually,
own?
we outgrew our speeding up thing by that time. That didn't work out so good for us.
Okay.
It worked well for the Ex-Whites because they had just an amazing drummer, Ricky Eggleston, who was he had won awards as a drummer, as a band drummer in high school. And he was just lightning, just a great drummer.
And you saw them?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were friends with them. We actually partied with those guys.
Okay.
When they were just called the Whites.
Okay.
Then.
Right. And so we mentioned MJs. We mentioned Sherlock's, Goofies. We could
Goofies,
throw Goofies into there. Beer Mug.
Beer Mug, yes.
What other places are not around
The Golden
anymore?
Nugget. I had a gig at the Golden Nugget every Sunday with a band I had called the Raleighs in 1985.
Yeah.
It started actually. That was Bernie White's rehab band. He had gotten out of rehab and wanted to start a fresh
Project.
life actually.
Yeah.
And man, that was a fun band. Souped up oldies with Ron Wheeler and Joe Lassman and my buddy Johnny Marzetti and Blammo.
Okay.
And we were like a gang.
The Raleighs.
The Raleighs. Every Sunday we would have a giant wiffle ball game in the parking lot of the Golden Nugget.
Where was the Golden Nugget?
West 12th.
Like by Powell, way out there?
Maybe not as far as Powell.
Okay. It's not there anymore.
No.
Okay.
It was run by this lady, Vicky.
All right.
And she liked us. And she liked that we would bring, we had about a few dozen people come to the wiffle ball game. And then we would just, we were done playing wiffle ball and it got dark, we'd start playing.
What'd you say? There was like 5 guys in the band?
6.
6 guys in the band. And it was all oldies?
Yeah, it was like Jerry Lee Lewis. Although we did a couple of originals, and we did stuff by the Leroy Brothers that was popular.
Huh.
That cowboy punk was kind of popular back then with the Bodines and bands like that.
So you are 21 years old at 83, 84, right?
Yeah,
And
so this was 85.
So that's 85.
That. Yeah.
You're writing for the showcase, like we said, a little bit.
Doing the quizzes.
Did you go to college?
I did.
Where at?
I went to Mercyhurst,
Okay.
but I flunked out, and then I went back as an adult.
I knew that, yeah, because you
Yes.
went to the D'Angelo School of Music,
Yes.
right? Mm-hmm. So back then, you didn't finish the whole...
No, I was I was a bad student.
All right, that's fine, but you were playing...
We were playing a lot.
Playing a lot.
Playing a lot. Pat Patton was a pretty decent agent, and he would get gigs.
Huh.
Like he got this really good gig at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois. That was just a hopping town.
Yeah.
Mabel's.
Okay.
And that, in fact, you can Google Mabel's, and there's like great stories. A lot of bands. That was a really hotbed for music. The Elvis Brothers.
Really?
Cheap Trick came out of there.
And so who'd you go there with?
That was Wiggling Judies. Yep.
And so was that the only band that you traveled with?
Magoon did a lot of traveling.
Okay, all right.
Or not a lot, just a lot of regional travel.
Yeah.
We actually went to New York, though, played at the Bitter End.
So the funny thing is the Bitter End is a huge club.
Still
Everybody
is,
knows. Still there.
yeah.
People know of it. And but what I was going to say is a lot of these bands that you're throwing out, there are a lot. It was hard for me to keep track of everything. And like I said in the intro, like you just said, you're in the Raleighs playing on Sunday, and you're probably playing with the Wiggling Judies on Saturday or whatever. The Baker Brothers. How did that one sneak in there?
Actually, that was when the Raleighs, half of the guys wanted to start playing original music again.
Okay.
And they started a band with the leftovers from the Dogs.
Oh,
Bruce and Jack. And then Bernie from the Raleighs, Bernie, Joe, and Ronnie Wheeler joined Jack and Bruce.
Okay.
Not Jack Bruce.
Yeah, right. That would have been awesome.
It's called the Squares.
Okay.
And they made a demo that was really good.
Huh.
And
then how did that lead to the Baker Brothers? Because that's
so we were Johnny Marzetti and I and Blammo were left without a band at that point. So at that point, Bradley Harrington and Paul Fortin from what were they called? The Del Rays.
Okay. Yeah.
They had just broken up, so we just combined forces and just kept playing. And that was Souped Up Oldies. We were both doing that.
I do this all the time on this podcast. I'll be talking to someone like you, and we'll throw out a name like Blammo. And the other people listening are like, what the hell's a blammo? Or who's Joe or who's whatever? Tell them Blammo's real name.
Bill Mattis.
Bill Mattis.
And he was a great friend of mine growing up.
Okay.
And he's a little younger than us. Actually, he got his start playing with Christine in Trash.
Yeah, right.
With Fleener.
Yeah.
That was Paul Tatera. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
Paul was a genius.
I was going to say, Paul went on to play somewhere else, right?
Paul was a early Pistol Whip
Oh,
member.
was he?
Yeah,
okay.
Here we're coming full circle.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. All of these names and some of the bands are kind of intertwining.
Yeah.
So the Baker Brothers is a combination of a bunch of folks. Why even the name Baker Brothers? Do you even remember? Or?
I don't remember why. I think we were just looking for something more normal.
Okay.
Something.
Than the Wiggling Judies?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you want to tell the story of the Wiggling Judies name?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Right.
It's funny. I was just at Erie Ale Works, and I was talking with Kevin Bensink, and somehow the Wiggling Judies
Who's going to be on?
Wiggling Judies came up, and this guy next to me he was drunk and started giving me a hard time. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, 40 years
about
later,
the name.
they still have to.
Jeez.
It's all Jimmy Rosenthal's fault, and then he leaves town to leave me to fend for myself.
So you are playing in multiple bands in the 80s, and, we've named a bunch of bands, like Rub the Buddah or Magoon, or, we drop these names in. My podcast goes to the end of the 80s, but you played in a ton of bands in the 90s, and we're going to get to those. But I want to mention some other ones that I kind of uncovered, too.
Sure.
You played 2 gigs in Brando.
That was also an oldies.
Yeah, what was up with that? I saw a picture of you, and it looks like you're wearing tuxes or something.
Oh, my gosh. I think, did we get those at Mailer's Closeout, maybe? That was, the Dogs were bored, I think. It was the members of the Dogs, and they somehow drafted me into it.
Okay.
And we played oldies.
And that was it.
And just played a few times. And
Gerard Hotel, I think.
Gerard Hotel,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Bruce quit early on. Yeah, he didn't like that much.
Bruce Lentz.
Yes.
Right, okay.
And
so it was just a side project.
You know what's funny? Bradley and Paul left to form the Del Reys with Tom Beam, and then that didn't last. Maybe it lasted a year, and then they came back and drafted Blammo and I for the Baker Brothers.
That's Paul Fortin.
Yes.
And Dean Gleason was in that too.
He was in Brando.
He was in Brando. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What else was he in?
The Dogs.
The Dogs. Right.
And the Frenchman.
And the Frenchman.
Yes.
I need to talk more about the
With
Frenchman.
John Drum and Bradley.
Yeah.
It's very incestuous.
It really is.
It's the same group, dozen people that are probably in all the bands.
Yeah. I mean, so how was that back then as far as I talked to folks about the scene? First of all, we're talking about an era in Erie, 80s, 90s, that welcomed original music.
Yes. Everyone supported one another.
Right.
Everyone came out and, came to each other's shows.
So that's what I wondered.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
That's how a scene, unfortunately what happened was in the 90s, bands, their fans were showing up and then leaving when their band got done and weren't even staying for the other band.
Oh.
And the bands were condoning that.
Yeah, right.
I won't name any names.
Gotcha, right.
I was working for one of them, though.
But only come see us, and then when we're done, leave.
Yes.
So you're not.
And we saw
supporting everyone
that
else.
trend in Buffalo and in Cleveland also. And I thought, what in the world is this?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you that question because I don't know. I mean, what I just described as the scene is definitely not the case it is today, and hasn't been for years. Not only because of the lack of venues for original music these days, right? I mean, there's very few venues where you can go on a regular basis. There's no what they call it, Magic Monday or
Modern Music Monday. Kip Elbaum, that was his thing.
Yeah, right,
yes.
right. I mean, there's none of that these days.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Well,
I mean,
there are some bands that are places that are trying. It looks like, my buddy
Philly on the
Carlos
Rocks.
from Mala Sangre.
Okay.
They seem to be playing a lot. Sandbar.
Okay. Philly on the Rocks.
Philly
I
on the
know
Rocks.
is really
Yes. Irish
trying.
Cousins.
Irish Cousins,
Yes.
right? Yeah, there's little pockets,
Yes.
once in a while, but overall it seems very cover oriented, And,
Yes.
So that's what I wondered, was there a point where you as a composer, you as an original music guy was like, this isn't even worth my time anymore, because I don't have anywhere to play.
I got infatuated with New Orleans piano playing.
Oh.
And got to go to New Orleans.
Okay.
And it's funny, my brother Patrick and I are watching Eddie Bow, who was this legendary cat from New Orleans that had this great piano act. And we're singing, we knew all the songs. We're singing the background vocals from our chair. And on break, he comes right over to us. Hey, man, you guys sound good, blah, blah. And Patrick's like, well, you got to have him up. He's a piano player. And I'm like, oh, no, man, no. And then he did his grand finale and then didn't have me up. And I was relieved. And then he leaves and says, and I'd like to bring up my friend. So that, I go up and his band were guys that were played on some of my favorite records, by Lee Dorsey.
Wow.
And I'm like, I was just petrified, but I got through it.
Yeah.
We played Lottie Miss Claudie and a couple other New Orleans, Rockin' Pneumonia.
That's got to be a highlight for you.
I vowed when I got back to Erie that I was going to learn these songs the right way, and that's when I started taking from Basil.
Oh, okay. All right.
Which was like boot camp.
Yeah.
I couldn't even play in a band. I had to devote everything to my studies.
Okay.
With Basil, yeah.
That's what I've always heard. That's.
It was funny.
Serious.
We got along great. He like Father Cray had a warped sense of humor. We got along great.
How long did you take lessons from him?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And remind folks who Basil is and where he was.
Oh, Basil came from a great family of musicians, the Ron Zitties. They had their own store. His dad was Mose. And Basil started off playing accordion and then became a fantastic jazz pianist and an even better teacher. And John Novello is one of his students, and he became pretty famous on the West Coast.
Sure.
And
He's been on the podcast.
He actually took all of Basil's teachings and put them in his book, The Contemporary Keyboardist.
Yeah.
Which is a great book. It's like a Bible. It is interspersed with a lot of Scientology, so
right.
I'm warning you about that, but it is a Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had John on the podcast before.
Oh,
and,
nice.
He
He's
talks about that. He's a beast.
What a beast.
Yeah, when you talk about a B3 and
yes,
a wall
those
of
two-handed
Leslie's.
Erie had a lot of two-handed piano organists. Like Kevin Sadowski was another great organist. Nick Nardo. Tim Roach.
Tim Roach was great. Yeah. Where did you, or I should say,
Mr. Johnny Drum.
Okay,
Great
that's what I was going to ask you. Like back then, and even now, like who did you look up to? Who did you look at and be like, I want to play like Nick Nardo? Or I mean, Nick was a few years older than you.
Tim Popotnik was he's still great.
Absolutely,
Tim. He's like music lessons,
right?
But somebody warned me that to not compliment him. That he didn't like. He felt very uncomfortable. Don't compliment him.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I can't see you going to see Tim at a Moonlighters gig in the 80s. But you must have seen them.
Yeah, Tune was in that band.
Right.
So they were like music lessons. Going to see Tony Stefanelli's bands was like music lessons for me. I enjoyed it. And I liked going to see Hit and Run.
Okay.
And Aura with Turk.
All straight ahead rock and roll.
Yeah.
You talk about Tony Stefanelli, it's more jazz, and then Turk and Aura and Hit and Run with who was in that? Gorzicki? Or no, he wasn't in that. That was
Eric Johnson.
Okay.
And
I'm thinking of who played keyboard?
Mark Gorzicki. They had Easy and Rhythm Method.
Sure, Rhythm Method. Right. Yeah, I was thinking I have a poster from where did I say, the Girard Hotel.
Oh yeah, there was a bullet hole in the wall there.
Yeah. So you've named a lot of good keyboard players in town and stuff. And
oh my gosh,
there were a lot of them.
Walt Slavinsky.
I was going to say, let's not leave off Walt.
Yeah.
I mean, you like guys like Walt, even Nick. Played in Rubyport. That's before you, but you knew of them. Obviously.
Oh yeah. Well, Mr. Yocklin was the football coach for Our Lady of Peace. So we do him as coach.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And okay. And we went to St. John's, and they had a double reverse that kicked our butt twice.
OLP.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. All right.
But Mr. Yocklin, great Coach Yocklin.
Sure. It's funny, like I had his son on the show right before the big benefit, and it's interesting. People know Paul Yocklin either in two ways.
Oh, yes.
Either as a coach or as a musician. Oftentimes they don't realize the two intertwine.
Yes.
But just a great guy.
That's like the Rudler brothers with being great coaches and musicians.
You're stealing that. He's another one. I got Ronnie. He's going to be coming on here.
Nice.
In
They're playing
about
again,
3 weeks.
right?
Still playing.
Oh my gosh.
It just played last weekend. Yeah, and he was my high school teacher. Yeah, absolutely. He was my son's coach. And
Bob Casey was my sister's boyfriend's best friend.
Okay.
And he would come over all the time, and he's another reason that we got the bug, the music bug. Bob was great.
But he's a country guy.
Yeah, well, he played everything back then.
He did. Okay,
yeah.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know, were there other folks, like you said, just stopping over to play, or you got exposed to this type of music or that type of music? Because we've gone through a bunch of different styles of music, and it's going to continue to evolve for you as we get into Rub the Buddah and Magoon. Even you were in Rich Wood and the Jaguars for a little while.
Oh, don't tell anybody that.
Well, was that a money gig? I mean, was that just...
it was supposed to be a money gig.
Yeah.
I think we spent more money.
We
actually had worse
outfits?
We had worse tuxes than Brando, believe it or not.
You did, yeah. And I have I always tell folks, bring me photos or send me photos. I'll put them on your episode page, which I apologize. The website for the podcast is messed up right now, but I'm getting to it. I'm redoing it. But I'm going to put that picture up there.
Rich talked his nice wife into joining the band and going on the road. We went on the road for a couple months.
Did you really?
We had a really nice van and a trailer.
Now, Rich Wood and the Jaguars, we should say, we're talking around 88. You played 50s and 60s.
Yes, but
Elvis.
Well, we were horribly out of touch. This is when Paula Abdul was reigning, but his wife was nice enough to join the band, and then she couldn't sing to save her life, and he would have her sing Soldier Boy, and not only that, start the set a cappella with her going Soldier Boy. That was very cruel.
So I know that band went through a bunch of people. Tommy Ray played in that band for a little while. Steve Michaels, Dan Wheeler.
Oh, Steve! I haven't seen Steve in a long time.
Yeah,
we had a lot of fun.
So
Danny, I still talk to Danny.
You did that for a little while.
Yeah,
just on the side. Again, you're usually playing in multiple bands. Are you still writing for the Times or
no? Not anymore.
Not anymore.
We're all retired. Except actually, Kevin still writes a column.
No. I meant back then.
Every now and then I would get drafted into. Kevin would draft me into doing an assignment.
Okay, yeah,
like a movie quiz. Or something.
I would find your name periodically on stuff, and so what are you doing as a regular job?
I was a cook.
Oh, okay. Where at?
Oh, I cooked at Sudan's in Lawrence Park.
Yeah,
I learned a lot from
the
ladies. I worked at Rum Runners when it first
really?
came out. In fact, the electricity wasn't very good back then. I don't know if they ever did fix it. But, I just met Joe Pop, and we put together a side band called the Zebra Muscles.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
We were playing at Rum Runners when Joe became the human circuit breaker and was stuck.
Oh, really?
And
what was he
and
touching?
he finally got freed. I think he touched his guitar strings and then his microphone, and he was just stuck there. This happened to me a few years later at the Greenfield Hose Company.
Really? And what did someone?
Knock him? We finally pulled. We broke the mic cable, which broke the connection.
Okay.
Unstuck him. But I thought, I just met this great musician, and it's all going to end so fast.
Yeah, right. I always like to ask craziest gig stories, funny gig stories. I mean, you were in some fun, high-energy bands.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, give us one or two anecdotes. I mean, aside from Joe Pop being electrocuted at Rum Runners.
Magoon playing at the Erie downtown gazebo in the middle of the day.
Erie Days type of thing or something?
I think it was, yes, but it was like somebody just asked us to play like that afternoon.
Okay.
And that was back when you had a lot of the transients were dancing and
sure.
interacting with the band. Remember Dancing Machine?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Dancing Machine. Rob had Dancing Machine and that Beelzebubba guy arm in arm, and they were like a chorus line. that was a fun gig.
And describe to folks, because we haven't gotten to Magoon, because that's the 90s anyway. 90, 94, 91, 94.
Yeah.
You played for about 4 years. That's you, Mark Webber, Rob Gray, Ed
Yes.
Cieslak, right?
Eddie Sichelski.
I didn't know how to say it. Sorry.
I didn't either.
Dave Calabrese's on bass.
Dave, yeah.
Basically
Dave
alone.
was a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I was kind of like our shtick. We were almost like lead bass.
Sure.
We constructed a lot of the songs to feature him. He was such a powerful bass player.
Was he doing that basically alone at the same time?
He was. He was doing that then too.
Yeah. Where's he at?
Oh, I just talked to his dad, and he told me, and I don't remember.
All right. So Magoon, we keep mentioning him. Let's talk about him. Release an album, put together
Two albums.
2 albums.
Yep.
And I know we skipped Blood Pudding and Rub the Buddah. We'll get to those. But 2 albums. Where are you recording mostly? TRS?
I did record at TRS, and that was a terrific experience. At Magoon, we found, actually we didn't find it. There was a terrific musician out of Fredonia named Rick Napoli.
Okay.
He worked at Costello's, and he recommended this studio in Olcott, New York, which is north of Buffalo, west of Lockport, east of Niagara Falls.
Okay.
By Wilson.
All right.
And we became great friends with the guy who ran it, Mitch Metzler, and he had everything. It was state of the art in a little tiny house.
Yeah.
And so we made a couple of the Magoon records. I also had a band called the Lysergic Generals that Magoon didn't do anything in 1994.
No.
And so I started writing with these fellas, and we went there. And Blood Pudding, and then Plato's Cave went there to record.
Oh, okay.
And then I brought a lot of business to Mitch, and we
Cool.
were great friends. And it was just fun to just go up there and hang out.
What type of music was Magoon playing?
Power pop.
Power pop.
Yeah.
That's a term that I've seen used for you throughout a lot of things in your career. Was that a good representation?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would think like Cheap Trick.
Yeah. Right.
The Knack was like
Love
a
it.
power pop.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm kind of going backwards, and I apologize. So we'll go from Magoon. Let's go to Blood Pudding.
Blood Pudding was more progressive rock.
Okay.
With some jazz influence. I had a jazz background, and so did Rick Lopez.
Right.
And then he left the band, and we got PJ Askey,
Right.
who was just terrific. Actually, that gave us a little bit of a jolt.
Yeah.
But there was a kind of a clash, because I was really getting more into the 3-minute power pop songs.
Yeah.
Although I was writing some magnum opus kind of stuff back then too. But it was just I was looking to be more concise, and Blood Pudding was very busy.
Okay.
But it depends on the song, we're pretty versatile.
I mean, you had a great guitarist in Joe Pop playing in that band, and he's a master of lots of different sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Art is playing bass, right?
Yes.
You guys don't last very long. Right?
About 2.5 years.
Okay. Did you record one album?
2 albums.
Here Come the Pudding's one.
Yeah. Actually, we recorded that at Skip Niebauer's place, the sauce sharpening shop.
Yep.
Well, I almost didn't say that.
American Artist.
Yes.
Skip was just on with Sam Hyman a little while ago.
Oh,
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Good old, I just saw Sam, good old Sam.
Yeah, Sam's on the road, and that second album
Was at TRS.
Did it ever come out, though? Is that the one you were talking about?
Oh, you know what? I made about 100 copies and just gave them away.
Okay. All right.
And then when we had a reunion 2 years ago,
yeah.
we dug them all up and gave them away again.
Cool. So those are collector's items.
I guess so, yeah.
For sure.
We took the cover photo. It was Bill Lucas was the photographer. And we went to Urbaniacs about 5 o'clock in the morning and took the pictures there as the ladies were making the blood pudding.
Oh, really?
We got to have our hands in the blood pudding. And
Hold on,
we had these bloody butcher aprons.
I don't know what blood pudding is.
It's blood sausage. It's like kishka. It is kishka.
Oh, okay.
The Polish sausage.
Got
blood
it.
sausage.
Interesting.
It's an acquired taste.
I'm sure. Yeah, I was going to say, you guys played a few reunion shows, right? Like you played one in 92, and then you got together a few years ago.
Well, actually, we were together until 92.
Oh, okay.
And then did one in 98.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking. I knew it was in the 90s.
Then we did a couple after that.
Okay. You mentioned the Zebra Mussels, brief band, right?
Yeah.
Ken Walters, Blammo, Mark Smith.
Mark and I also did Jumbo Gumbo. That was, you know the Sauce Boss, Bill Wharton.
Yeah.
He makes the gumbo while
Right,
on stage.
right.
Well, we had a mutual friend, and he became great friends of ours. Bill Wharton, he gave us a case of his hot sauce, Liquid Summer, and he gave us his recipe.
Wow.
And he gave us his consent to do his gig. So
Really?
we started making gumbo at Bay County Hotel.
He's a New Orleans guy, right?
Is he a
Sauce
New Orleans?
Boss? I don't know.
I'm not sure where he's from. Or a Florida guy, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but he hangs out in New Orleans
Used
a
to
lot.
play at Dockside or Bay City, right? Or Bay County.
Bay County.
Bay County.
Goofies.
Goofies, right? Yeah. Go back.
But we would make the gumbo at Bay County. That was us.
That was
and there was no windows in that back, so it smelled like roux
that back room
forever.
it got hot, and there's nothing back there.
But that was a great original music place.
That's a good point. Yeah, I even played there, way back in the day,
Yeah.
and I played up front and way in back too. But
Yes.
I don't think they even have music anymore.
No, I played at it's not Bruce's, but what's it called now? I played there once with Steppin' Pappy.
At
The Bay County, what it's called now.
I didn't know it had a different name. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Bruce's Pub and Grub.
Okay.
He owns that. I think he named it after his wife.
Okay, all right. We didn't mention As Is.
Yeah, As Is.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
That was like a Rocket 101 band out of Northeast with Chuck Rosequist and
Yep.
Mark Smith and Ken Walters and Jeff Ajax Moz.
I know Jeff.
Oh, he was actually the leader.
Oh, okay.
And he had been great friends with the Snowmen.
Yeah.
And he
Interesting.
finally started his own band. And then we had Bob Rychick,
Yeah.
was the lead singer. He used to be blow smoke, blow fire, do a lot of like pyrotechnics.
So when you say a Rocket 101 band, was it heavy metal? Was it hard rock?
It was like everything that was popular classic rock at that time.
and it was
early 90s.
covers
Yes.
and not originals.
Right.
So you tend to be going back and forth, right?
Yes.
Between. Did you always want to have your hand in the original stuff?
Yeah, even now, I have a dozen new songs, and I'm all set up to record them.
And right now, you mentioned Steppin' Pappy. Playing Steppin' Pappy, you playing Gypsy
Actually,
Heart?
Steppin' Pappy is kind of on hiatus
Okay.
right now.
You playing Gypsy Heart?
I just left Gypsy Heart. I was in them for 2 years. I just
right.
left in December, and David Krasinski is taking my place.
Oh, okay. And you were playing guitar for them?
Guitar and keyboards.
And did you just leave the Blues Beaters too?
Yes.
Okay.
After 17 years.
Yeah, right. We should mention that.
Yes,
I mean,
and John Carroll, a great musician, who I used to go see when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Macmillan in Life,
Right.
I think. Was that
big show band he was in.
That
Yeah.
was a fun band.
Yeah.
There were so many good bands back then.
Yeah, John Carroll plays in the band The Fabulous Leftovers, which is the house band
Oh, yes.
for the event that I hold every month.
Oh, I got to come to that. That's at
at the JPT Foundation. It's the old Hills right next to OLP on West
okay.
38th Street. And it's the first Tuesday of the month. And The Fabulous Leftovers is a band of guys that have played around for years. Tim McLaughlin, Durf,
yes.
Durf's in the band. Rick Cass is the drummer.
Oh, yes.
John Carroll and oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to cut all this out. The other keyboard player, I'm definitely going to have to cut this out. I can't remember his name. But yeah, John's a great player,
Yeah.
I
I just found out he has perfect pitch.
Yeah, that's what everybody's told me ever since I met him.
That
yeah.
must be a curse, I would think. Everything would sound bad, right?
Yeah, well,
Or he'd probably get used to it.
he's got it for sure. Okay, so boy, we covered a lot of bands. We did not talk about Rub the Buddah.
Oh, yeah.
How did we skip them? So, described in a Erie Times News magazine article as a cross between the Ramones and Rush. That was that was your words, by the way. I think you were quoted. It's you, Danny Smith, Blamo, and Paul Fortin, right?
Yeah, for a while, Paul. Yeah.
And who else was in that?
We were basically a trio, and we had Paul for a while.
That's right.
And Rick DeBello helped make our second record.
Okay.
So he plays on that, and I'm going to release that eventually. I don't know when or how or what, but that has about a dozen songs. That's been recorded.
Paramucci?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We might, maybe with a different title.
Okay. Yeah. What was the first album called?
Just Rub the Buddah.
Just Rub the Buddah. Dr. Rock loved those types of albums back then. You know, he gave you guys always, you know.
Actually, no, we made our first record way back in 1988. And it's a good thing because there was another Rub the Buddah from Rochester, New York. It was like a jam band.
Oh, really?
And they finally went to make their first album. They saw that we were already in existence, but I always think that somebody heard our name that they got. But anyway,
sure.
We actually had a manager at that point named Gary Revel, who was from California. We got him from the Billboard article that Magoon was in. But Magoon had broken up. But Gary Revel was such a nice guy, and he wasn't taking any money at all, and he decided to just manage Rub the Buddah for a little while.
Really?
And he actually talked that other Rub the Buddah into changing their name.
Nice.
So that was worth...
It's a good manager.
Yes. Yeah. And they became Buddah Hood. Okay. So they're kind of a popular band from Rochester, Buddah Hood.
Okay. So Rub the Buddah, 87 to 89?
Actually, we played constantly till from 87 to 91, and then took a little bit of a break, and then played 95 to 97.
Okay.
And then started playing again in 2000s.
All right. That's what I was going to ask. Is that the band that you've been in the longest, other than Blues Beaters?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like original band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be misleading to say we were together for all that time because we were like together in spurts.
Right, right. Were they each one of those spurts? Did you come up with new music?
Yes,
you did.
Yes, yeah, we probably Rub the Buddah has like about 40 original songs probably.
Are you the primary songwriter?
Dan and I.
Okay.
Yep.
How does it work? He writes music, you write lyrics, vice versa, both? Is there rhyme or reason?
We actually have our own songs, and then if they're not finished, then we try to finish each other's.
Okay.
But there really is no set. Sometimes the lyrics come first, sometimes the music. Sometimes you find a groove and then try to write it around that.
Is that how it's been throughout your career in all these bands?
Yes, pretty much.
It's not like, hey, I'm the primary guy. You got to do what everybody has.
It never works like that. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, right, right.
Magoon is a really Magoon got away for 3 years with just raw, playing inspiration without. It finally came time to really sit down and do stuff, and that's when everybody kind of lost interest. But for a while, we just had like a lot of spontaneous inspiration that we kind of lived off that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
What was the Billboard thing you said about Magoon?
Oh yeah, Deb Lyon got a chance to write an article for Billboard on unsigned bands.
Yeah. And
so she called me up, and I was actually more involved with the Lysergic Generals at that point.
Okay.
But Gary Revel thought that the Lysergic Generals were not cohesive. That's what he said. So he said, go with the Magoon because we already have product.
Okay.
But actually, it was kind of a mistake because we were already kind of broken up. But
okay.
But
when she wrote it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was nice to have the article, and then we got a chance to play in New York because of that. But it's funny, if you go look at it was an article for unsigned bands at the time. So then there's Magoon at the top, and then underneath us was this other unsigned band at the time called the Dixie Chicks.
Oh, geez. That's quite a difference.
And they hadn't got the little one yet.
Okay.
And then when they got the little one, that put them over the top.
They were on the same bill as you?
In the same article.
Oh, in the same article.
Unsigned
okay.
bands, yeah.
Did you travel anywhere else with Magoon?
We used to go to Pittsburgh a
Regional,
lot.
Yeah.
Go to the Decade. Played in Cleveland.
Yep.
Buffalo.
Okay. All right. How was that? how old at that point in the 90s?
I was old by then, yeah.
Kids or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got responsibilities and everything, and probably the rest of the guys do too.
Yeah.
At that point. So, okay. So we have gone, we've covered a lot of bands that you were in. And like I said at the top, usually you were in more than one. You liked that. You stayed busy. Yeah. Lake Erie Monsters, we threw that in there at some point.
Yeah,
right?
that was another souped-up oldies band
That's what
that became very popular in the county, East County.
It was like Northeast?
In Harbor Creek.
Okay. Yeah.
TK's was a big spot for us. What was the Hedge Hollow in?
Yeah.
The Fireside.
Right.
But at the Alibi Bar, actually, that's the only place I ever played at where I was on break and I saw somebody smash into another car in the parking lot and take off.
Wow. Remind me, where was the Alibi? Because I remember seeing...
Oh, it's still around in Wesleyville.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
right
I was going to say, no wonder. It's out here where we are. Yeah, that's why I see it. All right, all those bands, all those years, we've spanned a lot. Favorite place to play?
Oh, boy, there's so much. Bullfrog is a good place to play.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So you played there a lot with the Blues Beaters?
Yep. The Rathskeller, it's just one of those rooms that you just never... you never do bad in. I should knock on wood here.
Right.
But yeah, the Rathskeller's been a terrific room that was a terrific room for Magoon.
And, the Rathskeller obviously has gone through a number of different owners over the years. The Carnival Brothers own everything around there. They've really made it into a music mecca right now.
Yeah.
You just played some Christmas music there,
Yes.
Was that original stuff?
No, that was all R&B.
Okay.
Like we did James Brown and Albert King and Freddie King and William Bell.
But that's one of those places that's been around for a long time in bits, spurts of having music.
Yes. In fact, we're going to do an All Fools show on April 1st.
Oh, cool. All right.
With every song is going to have Fool in the title.
All right. But back in the day, MJ's, where else? Places that you loved playing and you wish that were still around.
We used to play the Ripley Inn.
The Ripley Inn?
Yeah. In fact, we had to quit one time because they started throwing bottles and cans.
Who was that?
It was a couple of the locals. They were mourning the anniversary of the death of one of their buddies, and they all got way too drunk, and then they just wrecked the place. Wow. There was a big guy who the cops were afraid of. The cops didn't come because they were afraid of, luckily, the big guy was a friend of mine, even though he wrecked my show. He was a nice fellow.
So it had nothing to do with you guys?
No.
Okay. No. Yeah, but it was definitely
and we actually went back. We went back and played. The Dogs played there.
Yeah. The Landmark?
The Landmark.
You played the Landmark?
That was never that much fun.
Oh,
but at least they had live music.
They did.
Original music.
Right, right. I was just trying to think of some other ones that aren't around anymore. That building's long gone. That was across from World of Music.
Docksider. That was
Docksider? Yeah, the original Docksider. Now, who'd you play there with?
Probably Rub the Buddah. Blood Pudding, I think, played there. Magoon probably played there.
You probably played a lot at Norb's.
Yeah.
We didn't even mention Norb's. The Krasinski brothers, obviously, their dad's running the place, but a lot of these bands, like Norb was one of the ones that was giving you guys the Olivers, Olivers.
Yeah. Around the year 2000, Norb's was for sale, and my brothers and I were thinking about buying it.
Yeah.
And Norb took us through, and the building was just in immaculate condition because he was the city electrician.
Oh, okay.
And he just took fantastic care of the place, and there hadn't been any bands in there in a few years.
So was there even a bar in there anymore?
Well, it still had a bar at this time.
Okay.
But we went in there, and you couldn't even tell that bands had been there. They had cleaned up everything. But we were in the basement, and I saw this sticker over in the corner that said, "The Abandoned Refrigerators." So that was like the only sign of because they had cleaned it up.
Did you know that band?
Yeah, I remember seeing them. There was a band. Trent Reznor had a band. I don't know if that was his band or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great name.
Played,
Love it. Yeah. And what is that building now? Is it?
I really don't know.
I don't either. Yeah.
It seems to be in good shape.
Yeah. I just wonder, that part of it. There might be people living above it, but
that was one of the that was one of the reasons we didn't want to buy the thing, because it was still kind of a daytime drunk.
Yeah,
and that would have been kind of depressing.
Right. Yeah. What's your favorite song that you wrote that you've played in any of those bands over the years? Which one? You love playing. Doesn't mean it's your favorite band. I know I'm putting you on
sick of them all. I always liked Skip Day Party.
Skip Day Party? Who?
That was Wiggling Judies and then Rub the Buddah.
Okay.
It was a true story about the snake hole in Northeast. I only went to Northeast High School for 1 year.
Oh.
But it was the most amazing skip day you could ever imagine. It was in May, and 20 Mile Creek was still cold. And there were about 1,000 beers in that creek. And,
okay.
And there was a swimming hole.
And there were snakes?
There were snakes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Actually, not too many.
Okay, all right. So that's what that's written about?
Yeah. Just debauchery.
Yeah. How about of the other bands, your contemporaries, is there something that you like now that you're like, man, I love that band? Or I love that band's song, album, there's lots of them, I'm sure.
Every time I see the Breeze Band, I end up singing everything.
Really?
Yeah,
But that's not original stuff. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, like an original band. Is there something by the Dogs?
What band that we loved was the Pinkertons.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of them.
Mark Borzon and Eddie Sanford wrote these great songs. Mark is a poet, so I've seen him at some of the Chuck Joy's poetry readings.
Yeah.
And I actually bought his book. It's very good. But he was just in high school then, and he wrote a lot of really terrific songs. Basically, I'm Not Political.
In the Pinkertons.
Yeah, in the Pinkertons. They
All
had
right.
a lot of good original songs.
Yeah, so I know that there's some folks out there that like to collect local, original bands.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And I didn't know if you were one of those guys, like you try to get those old tapes.
I have a lot because I had my own recording studio in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
And I did the Go-Go Rays and My Three Scum and the Mollies and the Assmen.
Yeah. Those are all, what should I say, punk? Or how
Punk.
would you?
Assmen was really fun. We did the guitar track, we would hard pan it one way and then record the exact same track and hard pan it the other way to get that Ramones
interesting
sound. Yeah.
What was the name of your studio?
Dat Masterson. That's when DAT was a big thing.
Sure,
RDAT, ADAT.
Right.
My RDAT machine melted.
Oh,
I went to get it like around 2010 maybe. It was wasn't stored anywhere hot or anything, but it was a TIAC, and I noticed it was like gooey, and I'm wiping it, and I'm wiping it, and I'm wiping it. It had disintegrated.
Really?
My RDAT machine disintegrated.
Wow. Gooey is never a good word to describe audio equipment. Yeah. Well, all right. What else? What are we missing? I mean, if someone says, what band was Jimmy Cuneo in? Have I covered all the big ones?
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah? Yeah. Is there anything else that we missed? Fun shows, fun events, influences, people? Well, we've mentioned a lot of people.
Willie Dixon. Oh, remember when Pal Joey's had the shows, and you could hang out with these guys. I remember I sat down at the bar, and Willie Dixon sat down next to me on intermission, and I talked to him for like an hour. Maybe not that long.
That in around 18th Street, Pal Joey's, or where was that?
What, 12th?
Is that the one that burned down?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. That's a memorable experience.
Yes.
Yeah. You've had a few memorable experiences.
Yes.
Some at the Fieldhouse even.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, the Fieldhouse. Definitely.
Well, let's wrap it up there. How's that sound?
Sounds excellent.
And then we can just talk about the Fieldhouse stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Well, Jimmy, thanks a lot. I appreciate you being on.
What a blast.
This was
Appreciate
great.
It. Yes.
All right. Thanks for listening, and special thanks to the JPT Foundation for sponsoring the podcast and for letting us use their events hall once a month for our free music night featuring the Fabulous Leftovers. They're a band of longtime Erie musicians who play for an hour and then are followed by 2 hours of an open mic. All the proceeds for the event go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. The music nights are held the first Tuesday of the month from 6 to 9 at the Events Hall, which is located on West 38th Street in the plaza right next to Our Lady of Peace Church. And finally, for information on what bands and musicians are playing in Erie and the surrounding area, please check out Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast and webpage. Jack gives you all the details you need each week on who is playing where. So, I'm Chip Shell, and I thank you again for listening to the Erie Music History Podcast.